Save my sons now. I don't care what it costs, just do something. Nathaniel Cross's voice tore through the cold, sterile air of Denver Memorial Hospital like glass shattering on marble. A heartbeat later, silence swallowed the hall. Only the steady hum of fluorescent lights remained. Dr. Aaron Feldman stood with his hands folded, his face drawn in a mask of pity and exhaustion. Mr. Cross, we've done everything that medicine allows. Every treatment, every experimental protocol. The twin systems are shutting down. I'm sorry. Nathaniel's chest heaved. You're not sorry. You're surrendering. The doctor didn't respond. His silence was a sentence. Nathaniel slammed his hand against the wall, voice breaking. I can buy a hospital. I can buy a research division. I can buy you. So don't tell me there's nothing left. Money can't command the body to live, Feldman said quietly. Sometimes, the body decides before we do. The billionaire stood frozen, fists trembling, staring at the sterile floor. His reflection in the polished tiles looked like a man twice his age, gray at the temples, hollow around the eyes, a man whose brilliance meant nothing in this moment. Nathaniel turned away, fists clenched at his sides, the weight of reality bearing down like an avalanche. He stormed through the hallway toward the private ICU, past staff who all avoided his eyes. Not out of disrespect, but because no one knew how to look a man in the eye after he'd been told his 5-year-old sons were dying. Inside, the air was warmer, softer somehow. Twin hospital beds sat side by side, surrounded by monitors that beeped quietly like heartbeats in a dream. Eli and Ethan lay still, too still, their small chests barely rising beneath pale blue blankets. Eli's eyelids fluttered. He looked at his father with the gaze of someone far older than 5. Daddy, he whispered. It's cold. Nathaniel rushed to the bed and pressed his palm against his son's forehead. Cold. I'm here, buddy, he said, his voice barely above a breath. I'm right here. He reached for Eli's hand and froze. A faint warmth pulsed against his palm, as though something unseen had sparked between them. He blinked, thinking it was the monitor light reflecting off the IV line. But no, the glow was under the skin, faint and golden, and then he saw it. One word formed across the back of his son's tiny hand letters made of light, flickering softly like breath on glass. Hope, Nathaniel gasped. What? Before he could finish, the letters shimmered, then faded, vanishing as if absorbed back into the boy's skin. The room went still. Even the machines seemed to pause. He looked around quickly, expecting a nurse or technician to explain it, but he was alone. The hair on his arms lifted. A strange calm fell over him, neither fear nor comfort, something in between. The air thickened, almost humming. And then he felt it, a familiar warmth brushing his shoulder. Wait, before we continue, if this story touched your heart, please hit subscribe. It truly encourages us to bring you more powerful stories. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know our amazing viewers around the world. Like a hand that used to smooth his tie before business meetings. Like the scent of jasmine that once lingered in the hallway of their home. Allison, his late wife. Nathaniel turned sharply. There was no one there, only the curtain swaying, faintly, as if someone invisible had just moved past it. Allison, he whispered, his throat tightened. Are you here? The light from the window flickered softly, like candlelight trembling in the wind. The monitor beside Ethan's bed beeped once, sharply, and then steadied again. Nathaniel stood motionless, eyes wide, torn between disbelief and longing. A nurse entered with a clipboard, startling him. Mr. Cross? He blinked rapidly. The air was normal again. The scent was gone. The curtain had stopped moving. He looked at his sons still, pale, silent. No glow, no word, nothing. Are you all right, sir? The nurse asked. He nodded slowly. Yes, I thought, but the words didn't come. That night, Nathaniel didn't leave the hospital. He sat in the dim family lounge, a place filled with the ghost sounds of sobs and vending machines. He stared at his phone, scrolling through contact after contact, world-class researchers, private labs, even black market medical brokers. He made calls, wired money, demanded miracles. At some point, near dawn, he fell asleep on the couch, and in his dream, or what felt like a dream, he saw his wife, standing in the corner of the twins' room, her dress fluttering softly like silk in a gentle current. She didn't speak, She only smiled and pointed toward the boys. When he followed her gesture, he saw their hands intertwined, glowing faintly in the dark. He woke with a start, sweat on his neck, the echo of her perfume still in the air. The next morning, he drove home to Aspen. The highway was glazed with frost, mountains glittering beneath the early light. His Tesla climbed the winding roads toward the estate that loomed like a sleeping giant among pine trees. The Cross mansion had once been full of laughter birthday balloons tied to the staircase, drawings taped to the fridge, a swing hanging from the oak in the backyard. Now, it felt like a mausoleum. Martha, the elderly housekeeper who had served them since the wedding, met him at the door. "You look exhausted, Mr. Cross." "I've been worse," he muttered. She hesitated, wringing her hands. "There's someone at the gate. A woman. Says she's here for the caregiver position." He frowned. "I didn't post any position." "I did," Martha admitted softly. "Just in case. You can't watch them alone forever." He sighed. "I need doctors, not caretakers." "Oh, she's not like the others," Martha said. "You should at least see her." Against his better judgment, he agreed. 5 minutes. A few moments later, the heavy oak door opened. A young woman stepped inside, brushing snow from her coat. Her suitcase was old, her gloves thin, but her eyes calm, unwavering, seemed to hold their own light. "Maya Williams," she said, extending her hand. "I heard you're hiring someone to stay with the boys." Nathaniel looked her over once, expression blank. "You're not a nurse. You're not qualified. You can leave." "I'm not here to treat them," she said softly. "I'm here to stay beside them, if they still want to live." Her words hung in the cold air between them. He crossed his arms. "You think love replaces medicine?" "No," she replied calmly. "But sometimes, it's what keeps people alive long enough for medicine to work." He almost laughed bitterly. Then something inside him twisted. He thought of the word that had appeared on Eli's hand. Hope. He didn't understand it, and he didn't want to. 48 hours, he said finally, his voice low. "If there's no change, you're gone." Maya nodded once. "That's all I need." He turned away, trying to bury the tremor in his voice. But as he walked up the marble staircase, a sudden chill passed through the hall, gentle, almost like a sigh. For a fleeting moment, he thought he heard Allison's voice in the whispering air. "Don't stop believing." He froze, looked back, but there was only Maya standing in the foyer, eyes lifted toward the ceiling, as if she too had heard something beyond this world. Maya stood alone in the grand marble foyer, the heavy door shutting behind her with a muted thud. The echo seemed to linger longer than it should have, like the house itself wasn't used to guests anymore. She looked up. The vaulted ceilings towered above, decorated with beams of dark oak and a massive chandelier that hadn't been dusted in weeks. A hollow kind of silence wrapped the space, a silence that didn't just come from stillness, but from Gree. The housekeeper, Martha, appeared beside her with a kind but tired smile. "Let me take your coat, dear." "Thank you, ma'am," Maya replied with a soft nod, slipping out of her damp coat and handing over her modest suitcase. Her hands trembled slightly from the cold, or perhaps from what she sensed in this house, the residue of something broken that hadn't become. Martha glanced up the staircase where Nathaniel had disappeared. "Mr. Cross can be difficult. Don't take it personally. He used to be kind, before," her voice trail. "There Martha nodded solemnly. "Allison." She was light itself. When she passed, he just closed every door inside him. Maya's eyes softened. "Sometimes, grief doesn't slam the door. It just locks it quietly." Martha blinked, taken aback by the young woman's poise. "You speak like someone who's lived a few I've seen enough to know silence doesn't mean peace," Maya said, glancing toward the hall where she could already feel the presence of the twins, weak but not entirely gone. "I'll take you to them," Martha offered. They moved together through long, dim hallways where paintings of ancestors and childhood memories once hung. Some frames were missing. Others were covered with white sheets, like the family had tried to bury the past without quite letting it go. When Martha opened the door to the boys' room, the air changed. The lights were low, the windows shaded against the snow glow outside. Monitors blinked faintly beside each bed, steady but slow. And there they were, Eli and Ethan, tucked into separate beds but close enough that their fingers nearly touched. Two pale, unmoving forms, too still for boys their age. Maya stepped inside and paused. Something tightened in her chest. These weren't just sick children, they were flickers of light about to go out. She could feel it, the dimming, but not extinguished. Not yet. She moved quietly to Ethan first, brushing his damp hair from his forehead. "Hi, little one," she whispered. "I'm Maya. I'll be here with you for a while. No needles. No machines. Just me." No response. She turned to Eli. His eyelids twitched faintly. Maya took that as permission and sat down in the chair between them. "I know you're tired," she murmured. "I'm not here to wake you. I'm just here to stay." Martha watched from the doorway, her eyes misting. There was something about Maya, something unteachable. It wasn't medical knowledge. It was presence. A rare kind of quiet strength that made rooms feel safe again. Later that evening, as the house settled into its usual hush, Maya returned to the boys' room after dinner. She carried with her a small wooden box. Inside were items that didn't look like they belonged in a hospital: a tiny wind chime made of seashells, a jar of chamomile honey, a worn cloth rabbit missing one ear, and a thin paperback book. She placed the wind chime by the window and opened it just enough for the mountain breeze to sway it gently. The soft, tinkling sound filled the room like a lullaby from another world. Then she sat again between the beds, opened the book, and began to read. Her voice was low, melodic. Once, in a forest she read until the boys' breathing steadied, until her own heart slowed to match the rhythm of the room. Meanwhile, upstairs in his office, Nathaniel stood by the tall window, drink in hand, staring at the snow falling over his estate. He could hear something faint through the floorboards, a sound he hadn't heard in a long time. A story, being read aloud. He set his glass down. "What is she doing?" he muttered to himself. A camera feed on his tablet showed the boys' room in muted black and white. He zoomed in. There she was, sitting in the same spot, reading, her lips moving softly. Ethan shifted slightly in bed, and Eli's fingers twitched. Nothing drastic, nothing medically significant, but something human. He shook his head and walked away from the screen. Downstairs, Maya whispered the final line of the story. "If you're still here and enjoying the story, we'd love your support. Take a second to hit subscribe. It really means a lot." And so, the foxes ran again, not to escape. She closed the book. Eli stirred. "Mom," he murmured almost inaudibly. Maya didn't respond with words. She reached out, gently took his hand, and held it between both of hers. "I'm here," she whispered. "You're not alone. If this moment touched you, like this video and comment where you're watching from, you might just find someone near you watching too." Outside, the wind picked up, blowing the chime gently against the glass. Upstairs, Nathaniel froze. That sound, it was the same chime Allison had bought at a roadside shop in Santa Fe. He remembered her hanging it in the nursery when the boys were born. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." He stormed down the stairs and stopped in front of the boys' room, watching through the half-open door. Maya sat still, holding Eli's hand. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. The peace in the room didn't need witnesses. Nathaniel stared at her for a long time, something unreadable on his face. Then he turned away, walking back down the hall, back into his loneliness. Inside, Maya sat quietly in the dim, whispering as the boys slept. 48 hours, she said softly. "That's what he gave me. But little ones, all we need is one moment, just one spark, and we light the whole room." The following morning, the mountains of Aspen were cloaked in snow. Thick, slow-falling flakes drifted from the sky like pieces of silence. The world outside Nathaniel Cross's mansion was frozen in time, but inside, something had begun to stir, something imperceptible to most, but not to Maya. She had barely slept. Instead, she spent most of the night by the twins' bedsides, humming softly, watching the rise and fall of their fragile chests, listening to the subtle shifts in their breathing. It wasn't improvement, not yet, but it wasn't decline either. It was pause, a hesitation in the downward spiral, and that, to Maya, was enough. At 6 a.m., she padded barefoot into the kitchen. Martha was already there, wrapped in a thick cardigan, sipping weak coffee from a chipped ceramic mug. "You're up early," Martha said, eyes tired but kind. "I never really went to sleep," Maya replied, glancing toward the window where the sky was still dusky blue. Martha nodded toward the kettle. "Water's hot. There's chamomile in the drawer." Maya smiled. "That's perfect." She moved with quiet efficiency, adding a bit of honey to the tea natural, not processed the way her grandmother had taught her. Her movements were measured, respectful of the stillness in the house. Everything in this place felt like it had been waiting, holding its breath for too long. "Did the boys rest?" Martha asked gently. "Better than the night before," Maya answered. "Not much movement, but their muscles didn't seize." And Eli muttered something in his sleep. Might have been nonsense. Might have been Mom. Martha's fingers tightened around her mug. "They haven't said that word in months." "I know," Maya said quietly. Martha set her mug down. "You have a presence, dear. I've seen many people come and go. You don't push. You settle. This house hasn't known stillness in a long time." Maya didn't reply. She just gave a small nod and sipped her tea. Upstairs, Nathaniel Cross stood on the balcony of his master's suite, looking out over the snow-covered yard. A single red cardinal fluttered across the garden, a rare sight in winter. He watched it land on the frost-covered branch of a barren tree and remembered the exact day Allison planted that tree. "It'll bloom again," she'd said, placing her hand over his. He hadn't believed her then, just like he didn't believe Maya now. Still, something pulled him, a restless discomfort he couldn't explain. He left the window and walked down the hallway toward the east wing toward the nursery. He hadn't entered the boys' nursery since Allison's funeral. The door was always closed, sealed, untouched. But as he reached for the knob, he noticed it was slightly ajar. His brow furrowed. He pushed it open slowly. The room was untouched except for the faint scent of lavender. The crib still sat beneath the stenciled clouds on the ceiling, though the boys had long since outgrown it. Stuffed animals lined the shelf. Tiny shoes gathered dust on the dresser. Everything was preserved like a shrine. He stepped inside and felt the temperature shift, warmer, as if someone had just been there. The light through the curtains danced strangely, almost like it was rippling through water. He turned in place slowly. Something was different. And then he heard it, the soft tinkling of a chime, but not from the boys' room. From above, he looked up. Hanging from the ceiling fan, slightly crooked, was a small white wind chime made of porcelain stars. He didn't remember installing it. Allison had bought it when she was pregnant, said it was for good dreams. It had never chimed before. Now, it sang faintly in the air. Nathaniel felt a chill, not from cold, but from memory. He reached out and touched the base of the crib, running his fingers along the smooth wood. Dust clung to his hand. Then, out of nowhere, the overhead light flickered. Just once, then steadied. He backed away slowly, shaken, and stepped out into the hallway. At that moment, Maya appeared, coming from the boys' room with a folded blanket in her arms. They nearly collided. Nathaniel started, startled. "Why was that door open?" "I opened it," Maya said calmly, without apology. "That room is off limits." "Not to them," she replied. "I could feel they needed it." Nathaniel narrowed his eyes. "That's not your decision to make." "No," Maya agreed. "It's theirs. I just gave them the choice." He crossed his arms, trying to bury the unease in his chest. "You speak like you know them." Maya looked directly into his eyes, voice quiet but unshaking. "I don't know them, but I listen to them. Even when they're silent." He swallowed hard. "You have 1 day left." She nodded. "That's enough." Before he could reply, Ethan's voice floated faintly from the room behind her. "Miss Maya?" Both adults turned. "Yes, sweetheart," Maya called gently. "Can we have the chimes again tonight?" Nathaniel's breath caught. He hadn't heard Ethan speak in a month. Maya didn't even blink. "Of course." She turned back to Nathaniel, offering the blanket. "It's chilly in there," she said. "You should sit with them, even if you don't say a word." "Oh." He took the blanket without thinking. For a brief second, their hands touched. Warmth passed between them, unexplained, but real. She walked away. Nathaniel stood there a moment longer, the nursery door creaking gently behind him, and for the first time since Allison's death, he stepped inside not out of grief, but out of choice. The following day began with the faint scent of cinnamon drifting through the hallways. Martha had baked something banana bread, perhaps the kind she used to make when the boys were toddlers and the house still echoed with laughter. Nathaniel didn't remember the last time he'd noticed a smell like that in his home. He stood at the top of the staircase, watching the steam from the kitchen curl upward like ghosts of mornings past. Down the corridor, sunlight crept through the high windows, stretching thin beams of gold across the carpet. He followed them quietly, drawn by something he didn't understand. When he reached the boys' room, he paused at the threshold. The door was open. Inside, Maya sat cross-legged on the rug between the twin beds, holding a tiny paper bird in her hands. The boys were awake, weak, yes, but awake, and they were watching her with cautious curiosity. "This one," she said softly, her voice melodic, "is called a crane. It means hope. Where I grew up, people believed if you folded 1,000 of them, a wish might come true." Eli's voice, barely a whisper, broke the silence. 1,000 is a lot. "Yes," Maya smiled. "But we don't have to make them all at once. We start with one." She placed the delicate crane on his blanket. "See? One is enough to begin." Nathaniel leaned against the doorway, unseen for a moment, feeling the strangeness of watching someone else fill a room that had been empty for so long. There was no sound of machines, no sterile smell of disinfectant, only paper rustling and the faint giggle of a boy rediscovering curiosity. It unnerved him and moved him at the same time. Maya noticed him but didn't stop. She continued folding the next crane, her fingers steady, her voice gentle. "When you feel afraid, you can whisper your fear to the paper before I fold it. That way, it stays inside the crane and not in you." Eli frowned. "What if the crane gets scared?" "Then I'll take care of it," she said simply. Nathaniel cleared his throat, and all three turned to him. He felt suddenly awkward, like an intruder. "You should keep the windows closed," he muttered, his voice gruffer than he intended. "It's too cold in here." Maya looked at the sunlight dancing on the floorboards. Sometimes a little light helps them breathe easier. She didn't challenge him, but her calmness irritated him more than defiance would have. He turned to leave, but Ethan's voice stopped him. "Daddy?" Nathaniel froze. It was the first time Ethan had spoken to him directly in weeks. "Yes, buddy," he said, his throat tightening. "Can you help make one too?" The request caught him completely off guard. "I don't know how." "I can show you," Ethan whispered. Maya wordlessly handed him a square of white paper. He hesitated, then sat at the edge of the bed. His expensive watch clinked softly against the frame as he bent over the paper. His hands, used to signing contracts and flipping through data charts, now fumbled with something simple and human. Maya guided his fingers. "Fold it like this," she said, patient as a teacher. "Now, lift the corner. Yes, that's it." He looked up briefly, caught the flicker of pride in Ethan's small smile, and felt something move in him, something old, something that hurt and healed at the same time. When the crane took shape, crude and uneven, Ethan giggled. "It's funny looking." Nathaniel gave a weak laugh. "Yeah, maybe I'm out of practice." "You'll get better," Maya said quietly. "You just forgot how to make small things matter." For a moment, he wanted to protest, but the words hung in the air, true in a way that didn't need defense. That afternoon, Nathaniel buried himself in his office again, trying to drown the noise in spreadsheets and numbers, but the echo of laughter from the upstairs room bled through the vents. He couldn't stop hearing it. At first, it irritated him, proof that she had invaded his space, disrupted the stillness he'd built like armor. Yet, as the day wore on, he found himself listening more than resenting. When evening came, Martha brought him dinner, grilled salmon and roasted vegetables, a meal he barely touched. "The boys ate something today," she said with quiet satisfaction. "Soup, a little bread, first real food in a long while." Nathaniel looked up, startled. "They ate?" "They did," Martha said, folding her hands. "Maya said stories make food taste better. I don't know what kind of magic that is, but it's working." "May?" He didn't reply, but when Martha left, he sat for a long time staring at his untouched plate, wondering how a woman with no credentials could succeed where entire medical teams had failed. Later that night, unable to sleep, he wandered the halls. The snow outside had stopped, leaving the world bathed in silver moonlight. As he passed the boy's room, he heard Maya's voice again, low, soothing, carrying the rhythm of something timeless. "Sleep, little stars," she sang softly. "The sky still keeps your light." He hesitated at the door, hand on the frame, listening. Eli and Ethan were asleep, their faces calm, color faintly returning to their cheeks. Maya sat beside them, her head bowed, humming quietly. Her lips trembled with the melody, and though he couldn't hear the words clearly, he recognized the tune. His heart skipped. It was the lullaby Allison used to sing. He stepped back quickly, as though burned, but not before Maya's eyes flicked open. Their gazes met hers, gentle, his bewildered. "I used to know that song," he said finally, voice rough. "Where did you learn it?" She looked down at the sleeping boys. "My mother sang it to me. She said it was older than both of us." He wanted to ask more, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he nodded stiffly and turned away. As he walked down the hall, he felt the faintest shift in the air, like the house itself had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. In his study, he poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. His thoughts wandered to the cranes, the laughter, the song that refused to leave his mind. He closed his eyes and saw Allison's face smiling. Alive. The day the twins were born. Her voice echoed faintly, not from memory, but from somewhere close. "Hope, Nathaniel. It begins small." He opened his eyes. The glass on the desk trembled slightly, the amber liquid inside rippling once, twice, before settling. A breeze passed through the closed window, gentle as a sigh. He set the glass aside and, for the first time in years, whispered into the empty room, "I'm trying." Snow fell again overnight, soft and slow, muffling the world outside the Cross estate into near silence. Aspen's winter blanketed everything from the rooftops to the trees to the stone benches in the courtyard, giving the landscape the look of something paused mid-breath. Inside the mansion, however, the silence had changed. It no longer felt like the kind that suffocates, but the kind that listens. Maya was up before dawn. She sat in the boys' room, wrapped in a thick knit shawl Martha had given her, staring out the frost-laced window. Eli and Ethan were asleep, curled beneath woolen blankets, their bodies still thin but less fragile. Their breathing, once irregular and strained, now flowed in slow, steady rhythm. It was the first time she had dared to believe they might actually come back from the edge. On the floor beside her sat a neat pile of folded paper, 22 cranes, carefully crafted the night before. She smiled faintly. Only 978 more to go. A quiet knock pulled her from her thoughts. Martha peeked in, holding a silver tray with 2 mugs. "I made cocoa. Real cream. Don't tell Dr. Feldman." Maya chuckled softly. "They'll love it." "They earned it," Martha said, placing the tray on the bedside table. She glanced at the boys. "They look peaceful." They slept through the night," Maya replied. "First time since I got here." Martha's eyes misted. "You're doing something right." "I'm just giving them what they were missing," Maya said. "Not medicine, not logic, just warmth." Martha squeezed her hand gently. "I hope he sees it too." But Nathaniel hadn't yet said a word about what he saw, what he felt. Not about the cranes, or the laughter, or the way his sons had begun to lean toward Maya, as if she were gravity, and certainly not about the strange flickers of Allison's lullaby echoing through the halls. He was watching, though. Each morning, he reviewed the overnight footage from the boys' room, not out of suspicion, but out of something he hadn't yet named. Curiosity? Guilt? A growing sense that perhaps Maya wasn't just helping his children but revealing something in them he'd stopped believing in. That afternoon, Maya found herself standing outside a room she hadn't seen before. The door was painted a soft gray, blending into the hallway, but something about it caught her attention. She turned the handle. It was unlocked. Inside was a small music room. Dust lay thick across a grand piano. Shelves of records lined the walls, jazz, blues, and soft folk albums. In the corner sat a cello with a broken string, leaning like a forgotten memory. She stepped in slowly, drawn by the stillness. The air was dry and untouched, but the moment she moved further inside, a strange sensation prickled across her skin as though the walls were waiting. She crossed the room to the piano and brushed the dust from the keys. The white ivory showed its age yellowed, chipped in one corner. She pressed a single key. It let out a low, wounded sound. But it sang. She played another, then another. A fragile melody began to form, halting at first, then fuller, familiar. Allison's lullaby again, but this time, in a different voice, deeper, sadder. A mother's love reborn through another's hands. Behind her, someone cleared his throat. Maya turned. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, arms crossed, but his posture wasn't defensive. He looked human, tired, as if he hadn't realized how much this room still hurt until he saw someone else inside it. "That piano hasn't been touched since she died," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to intrude," Maya said, standing. He shook his head. "No, it's all right. She used to play in here every evening after the boys fell asleep. She was good," Maya said gently. He stepped inside and sat on the bench beside her, his fingers resting on the edge of the keys without pressing down. "I told myself I locked this room to protect the memories, but I just didn't want to hear her music without her in it." Maya didn't reply. She didn't need to. The silence between them stretched, not uncomfortable, but reverent. Then she asked, "Would you like to hear it again?" He looked at her. There was a long pause before he nodded once. Maya began to play, soft, restrained, not perfectly, but sincerely. The tune rolled out across the room like fog lifting at sunrise. Notes that remembered the shape of grief but refused to surrender to it. Nathaniel closed his eyes. In the hall outside, Eli sat cross-legged with his back to the wall, listening. Ethan peeked from behind the doorway, holding the new crane Maya had folded for him that morning. Neither boy spoke. They didn't need to. When the song ended, Maya lifted her hands from the keys. Nathaniel opened his eyes and looked at her. "You make the house sound like it used to." She met his gaze. "It can feel like that again. Not the same, but whole in a different way." He stood slowly. "I don't believe in second chances." "You don't have to," Maya said softly. "Just be willing to try again." He didn't respond, but his silence felt different now, less like retreat, more like reflection. That evening, Nathaniel sat with the boys for 20 full minutes. He didn't talk much, just listened as Maya read from the same fairy tale she'd started the night before. When Ethan began to fall asleep, he reached for Nathaniel's hand. Without hesitation, Nathaniel gave it. As the boy drifted off, a quiet word formed on his lips. "Daddy." "Oh." And in that room, beneath the glow of a small nightlight and the paper cranes swaying faintly from string, something invisible moved between them, something light, soft, and impossibly strong. Not healing, not yet, but hope again. Morning broke without sound. Outside the mansion, the snow was thick and unbroken, untouched by footsteps or tire marks. It blanketed the ground like a fresh start. White, silent, hiding the scars beneath. Inside, the air was warmer than it had been in weeks, not because the thermostat had changed, but because something else had. The boys were sleeping longer, speaking more. Yesterday, Maya had coaxed Ethan into standing beside his bed for the first time in nearly a month. He had taken 3 steps before collapsing into her arms, giggling. It wasn't a miracle, but it was close. Nathaniel watched it all in quiet disbelief. He had tried everything. The best pediatricians, the most advanced treatments, specialists from across the globe. Nothing moved the needle. But Maya, this calm, unassuming woman with her quiet voice and patient hands, had drawn the boys back from the edge, using lullabies, origami, and warmth. He didn't understand it. He didn't like not understanding. And yet, he couldn't look away. He watched her now from the study window as she stepped into the backyard with the boys bundled in coats and boots. Martha followed behind, carrying thermoses of hot cocoa and scarves. The twins moved carefully, supported by Maya's hands on their shoulders, their little legs wobbly from weeks in bed. But they were laughing actual, honest laughter that bounced off the stone walls and climbed into the sky like song. Nathaniel felt the weight of it hit his chest like a forgotten tune. He set down his coffee and walked away from the window. Outside, Maya helped the boys sit on a dry bench beneath the old oak tree. The branches were bare, but Maya tied a red ribbon around one of the limbs. "What's that for?" Eli asked. "It's something we used to do back home," Maya replied, tightening the knot. "A red ribbon means someone is still fighting." It tells the wind not to take you yet. Ethan stared at it. Can we make one too? Maya smiled. You just did. Inside, Nathaniel paced the hallway, then headed toward the front door, hesitating for only a moment before stepping outside. The cold bit at his skin. He hadn't walked the ground since before Allison's funeral. His dress shoes crunched across the frozen path. When he turned the corner, he saw them. The twins looked up first, their faces lit up in surprise. "Daddy," Ethan called. Nathaniel stopped, startled by the sudden joy in his son's voice. "Hey, champ," he replied awkwardly. "Didn't mean to interrupt." Maya stood, brushing snow off her gloves. "You're not." He walked closer. The air smelled of pine and cocoa. "You brought them outside?" he asked, eyeing the boy's pale cheeks. "Is that safe?" "It's healing," Maya said gently. "They need the Sunday, the wind, the feel of something that's not synthetic." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "You sound like a philosophy professor." She tilted her head. "You'd be surprised how close healing and faith can sound." He glanced down at the twins, who were poking sticks into the snow like explorers. They really are different. In just days. Maya didn't answer. He looked at her, voice quieter now. "How are you doing this?" "I'm not fixing them," she said. "I'm reminding them what it feels like to want to stay." The words struck deeper than he expected. Nathaniel turned away, pretending to watch the snow falling from the trees. Then Maya added, "But they're not the only ones who forgot." He turned sharply. "Excuse me? You forgot too," she said, not unkindly. "What it means to stay, really stay." Then, he opened his mouth to respond, but the sound of a car engine cut through the quiet. All eyes turned toward the long, winding drive. A black SUV was pulling in. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "I didn't schedule any visitors." The vehicle came to a halt. A tall man in a gray wool coat stepped out, followed by a woman with a clipboard. The man's face was sharp, clean-shaven, his hair perfectly styled. He looked like someone who closed deals over cocktails and didn't wait for second chances. "Mr. Cross?" the man called, striding toward him. "I'm Dr. Leland Grant, NIH Pediatric Review Board." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. "I didn't request an evaluation." "No," Grant replied smoothly. "But your former chief of medicine did. He submitted a formal request for oversight when your sons were removed from the care protocol." Maya's eyes flicked toward Nathaniel, surprised. Nathaniel stepped forward. "Doctor," Feldman went behind my back. "His concern," Grant said, unfazed, "was that alternative care was being implemented without formal clearance. Your sons are on a federally monitored list, Mr. Cross. If their condition improves, the board needs documentation. If they decline under non-medical supervision, there could be liability." Eli shifted nervously on the bench. Maya knelt beside him, whispering something calm and private. Nathaniel faced Grant. "They are improving." "No." "Then you won't mind if we begin assessments immediately," Grant said. Before Nathaniel could answer, Maya stood. "What kind of assessments?" Grant turned to her, frowning. "And you are?" "I'm their caregiver." "You're not licensed?" "No," Maya said evenly. "Just trusted." Grant looked unimpressed. "We'll be using standard neurological reflex testing, verbal response, motor coordination." Nathaniel stepped between them. "They just started eating again. Walking, laughing. You're not turning them into lab mice." Grant's voice sharpened. "This isn't emotional recovery, Mr. Cross. We're talking about critical cognitive benchmarks." "I said not today," Nathaniel snapped, his voice rising. Behind them, Ethan had begun to cry softly. Maya turned toward the boys, shielding them from the tension. Grant adjusted his coat. "Then we'll return tomorrow. And every day after that, until we've seen enough. You have 48 hours to produce care documentation, or this entire arrangement could be revoked." Without waiting for a response, Grant and the woman returned to the SUV. As the vehicle backed down the snowy drive, silence settled once more. Nathaniel stared after them, jaw clenched. Maya approached slowly. "You didn't know they'd come?" He shook his head. "But now I know how many people are waiting for me to fail." She looked at him steadily. "Then don't." They met her gaze. Something hard softened behind his eyes. "I won't," he said. And with that, he turned back to the boys, took a deep breath, and knelt beside them. "Eli, Ethan," he said, his voice firm but warm. "How about tomorrow? We build the biggest snow fort in all of Aspen." The twins beamed, and for the first time, it felt like the line between healing and hope had been drawn, not in theory, not in therapy, but in the snow, by a father choosing to stay. The next morning, the world outside was blinding white. The snow had packed just right, firm enough to build, soft enough not to bite. Aspen shimmered under a crisp blue sky, the kind that made winter look like a postcard. Inside the Cross mansion, the mood had shifted. Urgency lingered beneath the surface like a low hum. The arrival of Dr. Grant had placed a deadline on the fragile peace that had bloomed in the last few days. 48 hours. That's what Nathaniel had. 2 days to prove that hope was more powerful than protocol, but none of that showed on the boys' faces. Eli and Ethan were giddy with anticipation, barely able to sit through breakfast. They stuffed warm spoonfuls of oatmeal into their mouths, as if snow fort construction depended on a full stomach. Maya smiled at their eagerness while Martha poured more cocoa, humming an old Willie Nelson tune under her breath. Nathaniel entered the kitchen dressed in a navy parka, gloves tucked beneath his arm, a beanie pulled halfway over his ears. For the first time in years, he looked less like a billionaire CEO and more like someone's dad on a Saturday morning. "Everyone ready?" he asked. Eli grinned. "Can we use buckets to make bricks?" "Only if you promise not to bury your brother in snow again," Nathaniel replied with a playful glare. "Promise," Ethan said far too quickly. Maya chuckled. "That means absolutely nothing." They bundled up in scarves and boots. Maya tied a red ribbon around each boy's wrist, small, soft loops of fabric that fluttered in the cold. "For strength," she told them. "When your hands get cold, remember the ribbon. You're not alone." Outside, they got to work. Nathaniel helped the boys pack snow into buckets, then turned them over like sandcastles, building rows of frozen bricks. Maya sculpted walls, reinforcing weak spots with wet powder. Ethan scooped snow into a pile taller than he was and called it Mount Victory. Eli insisted on making a lookout tower, in case of enemy snowball attacks. It wasn't long before laughter rang across the yard. Martha watched from the patio, her hands wrapped around a mug, eyes misty with something that looked like both relief and awe. Nathaniel stepped back for a moment and took it all in. The twins, alive with color, Maya, guiding them with the grace of someone born to this role, and the fort crooked and uneven but glorious in its imperfection. He could barely remember what it was like to watch his sons play without fear. He felt the wind shift. Then suddenly, a snowball struck him squarely in the chest. He blinked. Eli stood behind a snow wall, giggling, another snowball in hand. Nathaniel narrowed his eyes. "Oh, that's how it's going to be?" He scooped snow, packed it, and launched it across the fort wall. It exploded beside Eli, showering him in powder. Ethan howled with laughter and joined in. Maya took one to the arm and retaliated instantly, dodging behind a tree with surprising agility. They played for nearly an hour. There, beneath the wide sky and the bare limbs of the old oak tree, the Cross family did something they hadn't done since Allison died. They laughed together. Eventually, exhausted and damp with melted snow, the twins collapsed on a bench beside the tree. Cheeks pink, breath puffing in clouds. Maya wrapped them in a blanket, one boy under each arm. Nathaniel stood watching, a strange emotion pressing against his ribs. Not sadness. Not quite joy either. Something deeper. Something holy. He stepped closer. "Can I sit?" he asked. Maya nodded, shifting so he could settle beside her. He didn't speak at first, just sat in the quiet. "I never thought I'd see them like this again," he said finally, voice low. "They needed someone to remind them," Maya said, "that there's still joy left in the world." He glanced at her. "And what about you? Who reminds you?" Her gaze lingered on the red ribbon tied around her wrist. "I remember for myself. That's the only way it sticks." He nodded, silent again. Then Ethan's small voice drifted up. "Can we keep the fort forever?" Nathaniel smiled. "The snow will melt, buddy, but we can build it again, next time it snows." Eli frowned. "But what if you're too busy?" Nathaniel's chest tightened. "I won't be," he said. I'll make time. The boys nodded, content, eyes beginning to close. As they dozed off, Maya leaned back slightly, eyes on the sky. You know, she said, if someone walked in right now and saw this family, 2 laughing boys, a mother figure wrapped in a shawl, a father with snow on his boots, they'd never guess how close we were to losing everything. Nathaniel's throat tightened. That's because of you. She turned to him. That's because of them. I just lit the match. They decided to stay warm. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, without speaking, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. A folded paper crane. I made one last night, he said, slightly embarrassed. It's awful, but I tried. Maya accepted it gently, holding it like glass. It's perfect, she whispered. They sat in stillness, surrounded by the crooked walls of the snow fort, as the twins slept between them. But just beyond the laughter and snow, a shadow crept closer. Inside the mansion, on Nathaniel's desk, a manila envelope had been slipped under the door. No one had seen who left it. Inside was a series of photographs, surveillance stills. A blurry shot of Maya walking into a diner in Denver 2 years ago. Another of her arguing with a woman outside a daycare. A third, grainy but unmistakable, Maya, standing beside a man with a sealed criminal file. Attached was a note. This is who's raising your sons. By the time the snow fort began to slump under the afternoon sun, the warmth in the mansion had already started to shift again, though no one inside quite understood why. The twins were napping under thick quilts in their room, cheeks still pink from laughter. Maya was in the laundry room downstairs, humming softly as she folded the boys' tiny coats and scarves, her fingers lingering on a button that needed restitching. Martha brewed coffee in the kitchen, the familiar crackle of the percolator grounding her in memory. And Nathaniel? Nathaniel stood in his study, holding the manila envelope like it might burn through his hand. He hadn't noticed it at first. It had been slipped under the door sometime during the morning while they were outside. No address, no return name. Just his name printed in block letters. At first glance, the photographs looked benign, grainy, poor quality, but the more he stared, the more the edges cut. Maya. A younger version of her, but unmistakably her. One photo showed her in the parking lot of a dusty Denver diner, shoulders tense, face unreadable. Another captured her mid-argument with a woman outside what looked like a small daycare. The woman's face was blurred, but Maya's was frozen in motion, jaw clenched, eyes furious. And then there was the third photo. Maya standing beside a tall man in a leather jacket, his face half hidden by a beanie and shadows. His name wasn't written, but a separate page listed criminal charges tied to a case number. Assault, burglary, endangering a minor. Nathaniel stared at the name beside the mugshot. Andre Devereaux. Below it, a scrawled message. You trusted her with your sons? You don't even know who she is. He sank into the leather chair behind his desk, elbows on his knees, the photos spread out like playing cards on the rug in front of him. For the first time in days, he felt something old and familiar. Doubt. He wanted to ignore it. Wanted to believe what he'd seen these past days mattered more than whatever this was. But the photographs lingered, and the name Andre Devereaux kept echoing in his mind. He picked up his phone and opened the security feed. He rewound to 6:03 a.m. No activity. Then 6:40. A slight flicker. A blur at the door. Someone had slipped the envelope through and vanished in seconds. It was deliberate, calculated. This wasn't a tabloid. This was a threat. And the worst part? It was working. He stood and paced the length of the room, fingers twitching, mind racing. His instincts screamed at him. One part of him, the CEO, the father, the man who'd lost too much, wanted answers now. The other part, the part that had watched Maya save his sons, who'd folded cranes and played in the snow fort, wanted to believe in her. But belief had never come easy for Nathaniel Cross. He marched toward the hallway, footsteps echoing off the marble, his pulse thudding like war drums. Maya was in the sitting room now, helping the twins arrange their cranes on a string to hang near the window. Ethan was counting under his breath. Nina. 10, 11. Maya's voice was soft, almost halfway to 20. Nathaniel stopped at the doorway. She looked up. Their eyes met. There was something unreadable in his expression, not anger. Not yet. But something colder. Distant. I need a word, he said. His voice clipped. Maya blinked, stood. Of course. He gestured toward the hallway. She followed, wiping her hands on her sweater. They walked in silence to the study. When the door clicked shut behind them, Nathaniel turned to face her. He didn't waste time. Who is Andre Devereaux? Maya's breath caught. She didn't answer right away. Nathaniel threw the photo onto the desk. That's you. That's him. You were with him. And he's got a record longer than my security contract. What the hell were you doing with someone like that? Maya stepped forward slowly. That's none of your son's business. It became their business the moment you stepped into their lives. Her jaw clenched. You don't know what you're accusing me of? I'm not accusing, he snapped. I'm asking. Because someone is watching you. And now I have strangers on my property, slipping envelopes under locked doors, like we're in some goddamn spy novel. Do you understand the risk that puts my sons in? Maya didn't flinch. But her voice was tight. Andre was my brother. Nathaniel froze. She continued, slower now. Older by 2 years. Raised me when our mother died. Protected me from things you wouldn't understand. He made mistakes, bad ones. He got caught in the system. He took the fall for something he didn't do. But he didn't fight it because the woman involved was pregnant. And he didn't want the baby born into foster care. Nathaniel's face remained hard. So you just stood by him? I stood by him the same way I would stand by anyone who bled for me. The silence between them was heavy. Then Maya added, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. If you want to fire me, do it. But don't you dare pretend that those photos tell you who I am. They don't show you the months I spent working night shifts to pay off Andre's legal bills. They don't show you the children I held when their parents didn't come back. They don't show you what I've done here. With your sons. Nathaniel didn't respond. His chest rose and fell. Then, quietly, Maya stepped closer. I'm not here for your approval. I'm here because 2 little boys want to live again, and I won't let your fear kill their second chance. She walked out. Nathaniel stood alone in the study, the photographs still scattered across his desk. But in the hallway, behind the door, the twins' laughter returned, soft, alive, and Maya's voice strong, steady rose once more. He stared at the photos, then swept them into the fireplace. They curled into ash, but somewhere deep in the estate, someone else was watching. Not Maya, not Nathaniel, someone who had been waiting for that exact decision. The flames devoured the photographs quickly. One by one, the shadows of Maya's past curled at the edges, then crumbled into nothing, like secrets burned under judgment. Nathaniel stood still, watching them turn to ash, the fire's reflection dancing across his face. But peace did not return. In fact, the moment the final photo turned black, a gust of cold air swept through the closed study, unnatural, bone deep, like something from a childhood nightmare. Nathaniel turned sharply toward the window, expecting it to be open. It wasn't. He pressed a hand to the glass, solid, sealed, yet the air inside the room lingered, heavy, as if someone else had been there and had just left. Meanwhile, on the second floor, Ethan was stacking paper cranes again, carefully balancing one on the windowsill. He hummed to himself, lost in concentration. Maya sat behind him, braiding Eli's hair, a tiny comfort she'd offered once that had become a quiet ritual. You're really good at that, Eli said. Like my mom used to be. Maya smiled gently. She had a steady hand. I can tell. Eli glanced over his shoulder. Did you know her? Maya's hands paused for a breath. No, she said slowly. But I feel like I do now. Ethan chimed in. Sometimes at night, I feel her near me. Like she's not gone. Just behind the wall. Maya didn't dismiss it. I believe you. The boy's voice softened. Daddy said her voice came through the music room once. Maya's eyes drifted to the window, where the mountains loomed like sentinels in the distance. Grief has strange doors. Sometimes it opens ones we thought were sealed. Just then, a creak came from the hallway. Maya glanced toward the open door. No one was there, but the sound was unmistakable. The groan of pressure shifting in the wall, like someone had leaned against it too hard. She stood and walked toward the hallway, her bare feet silent on the floor. The twins remained behind, talking softly. She turned left, then right. Nothing. Only the long stretch of hallway, lined with portraits of ancestors long buried. Then she saw it, near the baseboard. At the far end of the corridor, a faint indentation, like the outline of a door. She moved closer. It wasn't new. The paint was faded, the panel seamless. But now that she was looking, it was obvious. A hidden doorway, once part of the original design. A servant's passage, maybe, or something older. Her hand hovered near the edge, then footsteps behind her. She turned quickly. Nathaniel stood there, brow furrowed, still holding the scent of fireplace smoke on his jacket. "You all right?" he asked. She pointed. "Did you know this was here?" He squinted, stepped closer. "No. But this house has 1,000 secrets. I inherited more walls than answers. I think someone's using it," she said quietly. Nathaniel stiffened. "You think someone's inside the walls?" "I heard something, just now." He stepped toward the panel and pressed his hand against it. It didn't budge. No latch. No handle. "I'll have it checked," he said. "Tonight." Maya didn't move. "What if it's not just someone trying to scare you?" He looked at her. "Then what is it?" Her voice dropped. "What if it's someone trying to protect something?" Nathaniel's mouth opened to respond, but a cry rang out from the boys' room. Not a scream, not terror, but a single word. "Mommy." They rushed back, both of them, hearts thudding. Inside, Ethan sat upright in bed, eyes wide, his hand pointing toward the window. "She was there," he whispered. "Outside. She was smiling at me." Nathaniel moved to the window. Through it open, nothing but wind and snowflakes. Maya sat beside Ethan, wrapping him in her arms. "What did she look like?" she asked gently. Ethan's voice was certain. "She looked like when I was little. Not sick. Not sad. Just warm." Nathaniel stood frozen at the window. Once again, he could smell Allison's perfume, roses and vanilla. He blinked hard. It's not real. Just memory playing tricks. But deep inside, he wasn't sure anymore. That night, as the house went quiet, Nathaniel couldn't sleep. He wandered the halls, flashlight in hand, searching for that hidden panel again. When he found it, he traced the edges with his fingers until a click echoed from somewhere behind the wall. A hidden latch. The panel opened. A narrow corridor stretched into the dark. Stone walls, dusty floorboards, and something else. Boot prints. Fresh. Someone had been here. Nathaniel's stomach dropped. He turned, about to call security when a whisper brushed his ear. "She's not lying." He spun around. The hallway behind him was empty, but his pulse wouldn't slow. Back in her room, Maya sat up in bed, staring at the red ribbon on her wrist. It fluttered once without wind. She felt it too. Someone was protecting them. But who? And more urgently, from what? Morning arrived in a hush, as if the mansion itself sensed it should not speak too loudly. The sunlight filtered through frost-covered windows, casting golden beams across the parquet floors. But beneath the beauty of the fresh snow and the promise of another day, something stirred an unease woven into the walls like a memory refusing to die. Nathaniel hadn't slept. After discovering the hidden corridor, he'd traced it quietly by flashlight, following it through cold stone paths and dust-choked air. It ran the length of the east wing and split behind the boys' room, branching toward what must have once been an old servants' quarters or storage chambers. Half of it had collapsed, sealed off by age. But the other half? The other half led to the basement. He didn't go that far. Not yet. Instead, he returned to his study, washed his face in cold water, and sat in silence, trying to make sense of the voice he'd heard. She's not lying. Was it real? A hallucination? A replayed memory of Allison's voice, confused with grief. But deep down, something told him it wasn't grief. It was warning. Downstairs, Maya stood at the stove with Martha, flipping pancakes while the boys colored in a workbook at the table. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon, syrup, and something almost sacred routine. Eli pointed at the picture of a dog and giggled. "It looks like the one in Mommy's old photos." Maya looked over. "You remember that?" "Sort of," Eli said. "She had that box of pictures under her bed. Daddy wouldn't let us look at it after she went away." Ethan looked up. "Do you have a box like that, Maya?" Maya froze for half a second. then resumed, stirring batter. I have something better. I have letters. Ones I never got to send. The boys blinked. To who? Ethan asked. Maya hesitated, then crouched beside them. To people I lost, people I miss. Sometimes writing them helps me feel like they're not gone, like they're still listening. Eli whispered, Could we write one to Mommy? Maya placed a hand on his. Yes, and I'll help you. Nathaniel stood just beyond the kitchen, listening. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop. But the way Maya spoke, it quieted the air. She gave grief room without turning it into weakness. Later that day, while the boys napped, Maya brought down a small wooden box from the attic. She had stored it with care wrapped in old cloth, sealed with a ribbon. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside were folded papers, worn envelopes. One of them had a small drawing of a moon on the back. A letter she'd once written to her brother Andre after his sentencing, but never sent. She glanced at it, hesitating, then tucked it beneath the rest. This wasn't about her today. She handed each boy a blank sheet and colored pencil when they woke. No rules, she said. Just write or draw something you'd want your mom to see. Anything at all. Ethan started with a picture of the snow fort. Eli drew a big red heart with 3 stick figures. One taller, 2 small. This is us, he said, and this is her, watching. Nathaniel stepped into the room, holding a stack of papers in his hand. What's this? Maya asked. He handed her the files. I had my legal team run the background on the envelope that was delivered. They traced the photos. They weren't from any database. She frowned. Then where? Someone had to have followed you before you ever got here. Maya's chest tightened. But who would even know I'd... The name on the envelope wasn't a real alias. It was a recycled address from a shut-down social worker's office in Boulder. Whoever sent this knew what they were doing. Maya's eyes narrowed. So it's not just about me. He nodded. It's about what you're getting close to. Her voice dropped. The boys. Nathaniel looked over at them, still writing. Or maybe it's about the past they're trying to forget. She looked up at him. You said Allison had secrets. He nodded slowly. Then it's time we start looking for them. That evening, Nathaniel unlocked Allison's office for the first time in nearly 2 years. The room was untouched. Books covered in dust. Framed photos still perched on shelves. A soft pink scarf lay draped over the arm of the reading chair. Maya walked in behind him, instantly overwhelmed by the scent vanilla and old paper. A life paused. I didn't even know this room existed, she whispered. It was her space, Nathaniel replied. I never came in unless invited. He stepped to the desk and opened the drawers one by one. Bills. Notebooks. Receipts. But nothing unusual. Maya moved to the bookshelf, ran her hand along the spines. Then something caught her eye, an old leather journal wedged between 2 volumes of parenting guides. She pulled it free. The initials AC were embossed in the corner. She opened it. First page, a birth date. Eli and Ethan Cross, January 14. Second page, a quote. What the heart remembers, the world tries to erase, but love always leaves fingerprints. Maya turned more pages, and then she stopped. A single sentence. If anything happens to me, look behind the song. She stared at it. Nathaniel, she said quietly, does that mean anything to you? He took the journal, read the sentence. His brow furrowed. Then his expression changed. Maya, he said, follow me. They moved quickly through the halls, past the stairway, back into the music room, the same one Maya had found days ago. Nathaniel stepped to the grand piano. He knelt and reached underneath, pressing against the bottom panel. Click. A false drawer slid open. Inside, carefully folded in a velvet pouch, was a USB drive. Maya stared. She hid this? Nathaniel's face was pale. Behind her music. Literally. He plugged the USB into the nearby speaker system console. A file loaded automatically. A video. They played it. On screen, Allison Cross sat at the piano, her eyes tired but luminous. Her voice filled the room. If you're seeing this, it means the walls I built didn't hold. It means someone found the cracks. She paused. I think the boys were part of something I didn't agree to. And if I disappear, it wasn't natural. Start with the file marked Snowdrop. That's where the lies begin. The screen went black, and the world suddenly tilted. For several long seconds, neither Nathaniel nor Maya moved. The echo of Allison's voice recorded years before her death hung in the room like incense, thick and lingering, both sacred and unsettling. Maya was the first to break the silence. She knew, she whispered. She knew something was wrong. Nathaniel sat down heavily on the piano bench, eyes locked on the screen where his wife's image had just faded. I thought she was paranoid, he said slowly, the words catching like gravel in his throat. She used to talk in circles near the end. Said the boys weren't sleeping right. That someone had changed their meds. I thought it was grief. Postnatal depression. Or maybe... He stopped himself. I dismissed it. Oh, Maya turned back to the USB interface. She said to start with the file marked Snowdrop. Where is it? Nathaniel moved to the console, brows furrowed as he navigated through the drive. He clicked open a hidden folder. There it was. Project. Snowdrop. PDF. He opened it. Lines of clinical data filled the screen, encrypted logs, blood work, patient IDs. At first glance, it looked like any other medical research file. But then Maya leaned closer and pointed. Those subject numbers look. They're coded the same way as the boys' hospital bracelets. Nathaniel's face drained of color. Ethan, Eli, these logs go back to before they were born. Maya scrolled further, her fingers trembling slightly. Subject 001B and 001C, approved for prenatal neuromodulation trial. She looked at him, horrified. They were part of a medical trial. No, Nathaniel said, shaking his head. That's impossible. We agreed to a standard fertility plan. There was nothing experimental. Die. Someone lied, Maya said, and not just to you, to her. Allison didn't agree to this. That's why she recorded the message. She must have found out too late. Nathaniel clicked deeper into the file. Look here, he said, voice now cold with disbelief. There's a name listed under trial authorization. Dr. Leland Grant, NIH Pediatric Review Board. Maya stepped back. That's the man who came here, the one who tried to evaluate the boys. Nathaniel stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. He's not a board observer. He's the architect. Suddenly, every piece of the last week shifted like glass cracking beneath weight. The unscheduled visit, the veiled threats, the sudden interest in Maya. Maya exhaled. They didn't come to observe the boys. They came to reclaim their project. Nathaniel paced the room, rage bubbling just beneath the surface. How the hell did they get access? How did they inject something into a prenatal plan without our consent? He looked up. My father, he said bitterly. He had connections at the NIH. He pushed for a private evaluation when we couldn't conceive. Allison said no at first. Then he called in a favor. And that favor cost her everything, Maya said quietly. Nathaniel pressed his fingers to his eyes. No wonder she started pulling away. She tried to tell me. And I didn't listen. They stood in heavy silence until Maya placed a hand on his arm. What do we do now? Nathaniel's voice was iron. We dig until we know everything, and then we burn it all down. Just then, Martha appeared in the doorway, face pale. There's someone at the gate. Nathaniel turned. Who? He says he used to work for your father, says he has something to show you. Nathaniel exchanged a glance with Maya. What's his name? Martha swallowed. Lucius Crane. Nathaniel's breath caught. That man hasn't been seen in 15 years. Maya's brow furrowed. Who is he? He was my father's problem solver, Nathaniel said grimly. If something needed hiding, he handled it. Minutes later, in the private reception room near the West Wing, Lucius Crane stood in a heavy coat, his hair snow-dusted, his eyes sharp as flint. He looked older now, worn down by secrets, but his voice was still clear. I didn't come to cause trouble, Lucius said, placing a folder on the table. I came because I made a mistake, and I'm not taking it to my grave. Nathaniel didn't sit. What kind of mistake? Lucius opened the folder. Inside. Ultrasound scans. Consent forms. One form unsigned bore Allison's name. Another, stamped, approved, bore a forged signature. That, Lucius said, was the beginning of Project Snowdrop. He looked at Maya. They flagged her too, he said. Not you specifically, but people like you. Black caregivers with clean records, emotionally intelligent, high resilience scores. They weren't looking for nurses. They were looking for keys. Keys? Maya asked. Lucius nodded. To unlock the test subjects. The boys. You're not just a nanny. You were a control variable. Nathaniel's face turned to stone. So they sent her here, he said. To trigger some part of the program? Lucius shook his head. No, I don't think she was planted. I think she was drawn. Subconsciously. Whatever they did to those boys. Your wife broke part of it. And this woman here? She's finishing the job. The room was silent. Maya's voice cut through. Why now? Why tell us this after so many years? Lucius looked at her, haunted. Because your presence changed something in the boys. And in the system watching them. I've seen what happens when the wrong people try to interfere. You've got maybe 3 days before they escalate. I figured you'd want a fighting chance. No, Nathaniel stepped forward. Then tell us everything. Every name, every file, every backup server. Lucius nodded. Then we start with DC. The project isn't buried in a vault. It's hiding in plain sight. In hospitals, schools, even adoption agencies. He looked at the both of them. You're not just fighting to save 2 children anymore. You're fighting to expose a system. Nathaniel met Maya's eyes. For the first time, the war was clear. That night, Maya lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. Snow whispered against the windows like restless ghosts, and the house seemed to breathe quiet, aware. Her fingers traced the edge of the red ribbon still tied around her wrist, now slightly frayed from wear. She replayed everything in her mind. The forged medical consent. The name Project Snowdrop. The revelation that she might have been selected long before she ever answered the job ad. A control variable. That's what Lucius had said. Her presence wasn't accidental, but neither was her love for those boys. She refused to believe she was just another part of an experiment. Down the hall, Nathaniel stood at the old liquor cabinet in his study. He poured a single glass of scotch but didn't drink. He stared at the flame in the fireplace, as if daring it to offer an answer. He could still see Allison's face on the screen, eyes desperate, voice steady. If anything happens to me, look behind the song. She knew, and he hadn't listened. Now there was no room left for denial, no space for grief, only action. The next morning, Nathaniel, Maya, and Lucius gathered in the breakfast room before the boys woke. Martha stood nearby, arms crossed, concern etched deep into her wrinkles. You sure about this? She asked Nathaniel. No, he said, but I'm sure I can't stay still. Lucius spread a map on the table, an aerial layout of DC, with red circles drawn around 5 buildings, a pediatric neurological research lab, a private school for gifted children, an abandoned orphanage, a fertility clinic, and a federal archive building. The project's origin point was this clinic, Lucius said, pointing at the red circle in Georgetown. It was the cover operation. NIH routed prenatal trials through it for 5 years. Snowdrop was meant to enhance cognitive empathy and language development, but they were testing neuromodulation agents on embryos. Maya stared at him. How many children? Lucius looked down. Over 200. Nathaniel cursed under his breath. Where are they now? Maya asked. Some were adopted. Some died from complications before their first birthdays. The rest? Lucius paused. No one knows. Records vanish at age 3. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. That's the age the boys started regressing. Maya stepped forward. So what's our first move? Lucius hesitated. We split up. I head to the archive. You get the hard copies. You, he nodded at Nathaniel, head to Georgetown. That clinic burned down 3 years ago, but its director is still alive. He's working under a different name now, Harold Kingsley, lives in a gated community in Virginia. Nathaniel looked at Maya. You're staying here. She raised an eyebrow. No, I'm not. I need you to protect them, he said, not just watch them. If anything goes sideways. You mean when? She corrected softly. He didn't argue. By late afternoon, Nathaniel was on the road to Virginia with a manila folder of fake credentials and a concealed recording device. His jaw was clenched tight the entire drive. Maya remained at the estate. While the twins built towers of Legos and watched old cartoons, she installed new locks on every door, double-checked window alarms, and downloaded backup files from the USB to a protected cloud. At dusk, while the boys napped, she returned to the hidden corridor. This time, she wasn't looking for answers. She was preparing for a fight. Flashlight in hand, she followed the corridor to the sealed portion near the basement. The air was thick, with mold and silence. Then, behind a half-rotted bookshelf, she saw something that stopped her cold. A blanket and a coffee cup